Welcome to EB Reads. Today we are going to talk about The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This book was published in 2020 and it is her debut novel. Now I read it this year because I'm a little late. Okay, that's going to be the theme of this channel is I am late to the party. And that's okay. So this is the first book in a series called the Bethel series is what I'm seeing online. The next book is called The Dawn of the Coven, which was published in 2021. That particular book I have not found. I've done Amazon searches, but I have found it on Google, just not a way for me to borrow the book from the library or to purchase the book for myself. So we're going to do a little bit more searching for that. So this book is set in an unspecified time period, but if I were to label it as something, probably during the Puritanism, early American history, probably around that time. There's no modernization, there's no cars, and certainly no cell phones or even regular old landlines. There's nothing like that happening. It seems to be pretty primitive. Takes place in a territory called Bethel. Bethel is fairly large. I don't know how large it is, but it is fairly large. And it is gated. So I'm not sure if there's a fence that goes all the way around it, but it is gated and the gate is guarded. You're not allowed to leave the town unless you have special permission. So don't be sneaking off. Parts of the town have a forest around it, a pretty dark forest. It's dense in some areas, and the forest is not a place that you want to go because there are witches that live there. So beware, don't go to the forest. Nuh-uh. Follows a religion that was created by the first prophet. So the first prophet is somebody that defeated the witches like the first time, and the prophet line of succession is from son to son to son. So it starts out with the first prophet, and then you've got son to son to son to son. So I don't know which descendant we're on right now, but there is a current prophet, and he has an adult son who is preparing to take his place. The story follows 16-year-old Emmanuel, who was born of a forbidden relationship, if you will. No, not if you will. It is a forbidden relationship, according to this town, to the community and the religious connotations that apply. Her mother was the daughter of an apostle, and her mother fell in love with a young man who belonged to a place called the outskirts of town. And it's just called the outskirts because these are where people who are kind of banished from regular Bethel proper live. So they aren't necessarily kicked out of the town, the territory, but they live out of the population. And you're not supposed to go hang out with them either. So my initial thoughts about the story, and excuse the squeaking, I have a puppy in here and, you know, it's gotta be chewing on stuff, and that's okay. I initially thought that the towns that are outside of Bethel, around the Bethel territory, were modern towns and modern cities. There were, you know, buses and cars and all that kind of stuff because of the way the people were not allowed to leave. Turns out that's not true. So it's not like they're a hidden community kept separated from everybody else because of reasons. It's more that they're isolated based on their religion, and the prophet says you can't go to the other towns, so don't you be going to the other towns, okay? You're going to be in trouble. You'll be in serious trouble. The witches, I thought, were regular people. I thought that because of indoctrination and the strict rules within the religious community that, I'm sorry, my pup wants to get up and see me. Come here. Come here. You just gonna make a bunch of noise so I can't talk to myself? Okay. So he's just gonna make a bunch of noise so I can't talk to myself. And his brother's in here too, and his brother's probably gonna make a bunch of noise because he likes to talk a lot too. It's like, Mom's talking about stuff, so I'm gonna talk too. So I thought the witches were the product of this young lady Emmanuel's imagination, that maybe these people were dressed up a different way and they didn't look familiar, so in her mind they were witches. It turns out that's not true. They were not just regular people dressed differently from everybody else, and so her indoctrination and belief system didn't play a role in the fact that these were actual witches. And these weren't necessarily friendly witches. So if you think about like people who practice Wiccanism and that sort of thing, these weren't like those. These are the products of nature and banishment. Kind of weird. They're named and they tell you what they're about, but I don't know if they were ever living people or not. Maybe they were at some point. I'm not really sure. The prophet is the guy who's in charge of everything in this town. And as I said, he gets his job based on his descendancy, so his bloodline. So he's related to the very first prophet that caused all this stuff to happen. And they have a group of individuals called individuals called apostles. And the apostles' job is to make sure that everyone's complying with the prophet's wishes and what the Holy Scripture dictates. Okay, so the Holy Scripture is something that has been written down by the first prophet, and they follow it on and on and on throughout the rulings of the different prophets. So they have something called visions. So the apostles and the prophets, or maybe it's just the prophet, they have visions where they can see things, and it kind of knocks them off their socks and they don't know what's going on for a second. But we witness a first vision by the prophet's son a little bit later on in the book. So everyone's a little bit like, oh no, this means that his father, the main prophet, is going to pass away soon, and so the son can take his place, because that's typically how it works in this society. The prophet and his apostles are all polygamous, so they have different wives, and they can choose different wives at any point during their life. So they'll have their first wife, which holds a higher ranking within the family unit, within the community, and they'll have their second, third, fourth, whatever wives, and they can just keep marrying until the guy dies, basically. They can have children all the way up to that point. Emmanuel's mother, or not mother, I'm sorry, her grandmother, so her grandfather's wife, Martha, is a midwife. So her job is to help with the birth of other children. She does have a gift, and that gift is to name children. The naming isn't like she's just coming up with a name. It's funneled down to her through the father. The father is basically the creator of the universe, the one who gives them their visions and that sort of thing. So she has that special gift of naming the babies. There are some times where she has no name, and that child is then considered cursed because the father didn't bother to give them a name. I think it's a good story. There were some areas where I was a little bit confused or didn't understand why we were even going there. I'll talk about that in a minute. One of them I call a plot hole because it kind of is to me. It may not actually be one. There may have been a purpose for it other than, like convenience of the plot or something like that, just to make sure that something is in someone's hands so they can do something with it. But there's nothing further that happens with it. So I'll get there. Okay, I'm just going to talk about, since I've already been talking about it, the plot hole. So at some point in the story, at one point in the story, I should say, there are a bunch of plagues that happen. There's 4 plagues that come about for whatever reason. Part of Emmanuel's storyline is figuring out, why we have these plots, or why we have these plagues. And this is something she takes upon herself. She just does this on her own. There's reasons for that, which are in the story that I'm not going to get into here. So she wants to figure out how to cure the plagues. Well, the prophet is getting kind of upset because of these plagues. I mean, imagine your whole town is being taken out by these plagues that are caused by the witches, and apparently one individual who is not a witch or who does not belong to the witches in the woods is causing it, according to the prophet. So the prophet wants to see this census. So the census is basically a family tree or a bloodline list, or bloodline, I don't know, like whose parents and grandparents and great-grandparents and all that, so that they know who was touched by the witch's bloodline. So apparently there are some people who have witches in their bloodline. In other words, they come from the outskirts, because that's pretty much what they think of the people in the outskirts. So Emmanuel is one of those, because her father was from the outskirts and you weren't allowed to hang out with them. So she has that mark against her in her family tree, in her bloodline. And anyone who has the witch's blood, or is tainted by the witch's blood, or for whatever reason, has a mark next to their name, a sigil that has been stamped next to their name. And this indicates whether that person has the potential to become a witch. And apparently Emmanuel has that potential because of where she was born or who her father was. and nothing ever comes of it. The prophet asks his son Ezra to go collect all this stuff so that he can review it, and nothing ever happens. The only thing that happens is Ezra does something with one person's bloodline history, and that's it. Nothing else comes out of it. So I'm not sure if it was a plot device just to get that into his hands, because why else would he have it? But nothing comes of it. Maybe later on in a follow-on story, this will come to light. But in this particular book, it did not, which is fine. If you can just forgive it for that, and that's fine. Stuff like that happens. I had some questions too, like there are towns outside of Bethel that don't follow the rules that the Bethelian territory follows. They don't follow the prophet's laws and that. So it seems that the plagues only affect the territory of Bethel. They don't affect these other outlying towns. And we find out because an individual does leave Bethel to find out what's going on, to go find somebody to help them figure out what's going on. And the plagues barely touch them. I'll give you an example. One of the plagues was the water turned into blood. And I'm not talking about like it turned red like Kool-Aid or something, but it was blood. That's all it was, blood. And it didn't seem to impact the town that this individual went to. So I don't know why it's only happening at Bethel. It may have something to do with the first prophet, and maybe there was a curse placed on the land because of what the first prophet did, which was to fight against the witches of the woods. Men who are in line to be prophets seem to be the only ones who it's acceptable to have visions or some kind of supernatural power. Why Martha is allowed to have that and not be considered a witch, I don't know, because it seems like witches who are female in this story, if they have some kind of an ability, it's seen as like bad. You shouldn't be, as a woman having these types of visions or whatever, because you might curse everybody. So that's kind of how women are treated in this particular society. And since Martha has the gift of naming, I guess because she does a service as a midwife, she's okay. It's all right that she has the gift of names directly from the Father. But they don't discuss any other women having any other jobs or having any other type of supernatural ability. She is not considered a witch at all. Again, maybe it's because of her role in society. The ending of the book is left pretty open. It's not like there's a really super happy ending or a really sad ending or anything like that. It's like, okay, now what happens? Now that we took care of this stuff here, what's going to happen next? So it kind of leaves it open. It doesn't really need a sequel, but it does have one, I discovered after I finished this book. I don't know where to find the book, and I would like to read it to see what happens next. Are they ever going to figure out what's going on with the prophet and what's going to happen after these, what do you call them? After, what were they called? These plagues, after the plagues happened. So, yeah, I'm a little bit wondering what's going to happen next. As far as recommended readers, this book is considered young adult. I'm not sure what young adult means. I don't know if there's an age aligned with it. I didn't do any research on it either. I just assume it's good for teenagers and above. I would probably recommend this for readers over the age of 16, just simply because of what goes on. And it's kind of heavy with religion and what the rules are for witches and how they deal with witches. So there's some violence in there. I will say, though, that there's nothing gratuitous in here at all. Anything that happens is pertinent to the story and the characters within it. So there's nothing going on that's just there just to be there. Like, hey, I know you're getting bored, read this. No, it's not like that at all. The book keeps you in it just by itself. It doesn't need any of the gratuitous nature of sex, violence, and nudity, or even sex scenes or anything like that. As I was reading it, I compared it to at least 3 different stories that I've read or that I've seen. 2 of them are movie. Well, one of them's a movie. One of them's a TV show. And one of them is a classical book. So it reminds me of The Village by M. Night Shyamalan. because, like I said before, I thought that this was just an isolated area for purposes of control or some kind of an experiment, and that there was a modern world outside the gates, which is why they didn't want anyone to leave. It reminds me of The Handmaid's Tale, the series on Hulu, by Margaret Atwood, which pretty much defines that women are limited to what they're allowed to do. This book doesn't really talk about what women do outside of Martha and Emmanuel's family. The wives of the prophet and of the apostles just seem to be there to take care of the prophet or the apostles. They don't seem to have any other role. I don't know if they bake cookies or anything. Don't know what they do. In The Handmaid's Tale, the women are limited to a supporting role of their husbands, or to have children, or to be the vessel by which to provide children. And it also reminds me of The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Most of you probably know what that story is about. Set in Puritan times. There were very strict rules, and you would be punished for violating any of those rules. And the Scarlet Letter, of course, was the letter A that was embroidered around Hester Prynne for adultery. In the same way that she was marked for committing the sin in the year of the witching, the women who are married to the prophet receive a mark on their forehead. So like right around here, they receive a mark that's cut into them. And that serves as a mark of honor, saying that you are married to the prophet, you were specially chosen. This is a position of honor, and everyone knows who you are at that point. It requires a blood sacrifice for whatever reason to sanctify the union, whatever. So in the way that the Scarlet Letter uses the mark or the symbol for as punishment, as shameful, the mark in the year of the witching is for honor. However, in the Scarlet Letter, Hester Prynne's like, screw that, I'm going to make this letter pretty. And she did. And I don't blame her. If you're going to have to wear something for the rest of your life, you might as well make it the way you want it to be. So overall, this book was good. In my opinion, it had a little bit of a slow start, but I'm patient with that because I understand that we've got to set up the scene. We got to learn who certain people are, where they come from, which helps us understand their motivations. Some people might say, well, this is a book about a bunch of religious men and how they're always putting women in a corner. Well, it may be or it may not be. I don't look at books that way. When I read a story, I look at the story. What is the story? What's happening in the story? What are we doing in the story? And does the story make sense? That's what I'm looking for in any book that I read. I'm not looking for some overarching statement that the author is trying to make. And I certainly am not going to put words in the author's mouth about what they're trying to say. Okay, that's not my place. That's their place to do that. I don't own that. One thing that I would ask, and I would love to have in this book, and I don't have any direct contact with the author, but maybe if she puts out another edition of the story, to include a map, because Bethel is really big, and we don't know where Bethel sits in the realm of everything, or how far away the other towns are that they keep talking about in the story. There's a map within one, I think it's in the prophet's home. There's a map of all the territories and the little cities and all that, but we don't get to see that, so we don't know how far away everything is, which would be kind of nice so you can understand the timing, how long it takes to get from one place to another. You know, does it take hours? Does it take weeks? Or is it like 5 minutes away or something like that? I don't know. I just like maps in a story. It helps me feel like I'm there. It helps me see like the, what do you call it? The topographical nature of the place, where the forests are, where the mountains are, where the rivers are. It just kind of puts the story together for me, and I really enjoy that. But if the author decides not to do that, that's okay. That's not going to keep me from reading their next book. Okay, that's not the first thing that I do when I'm picking out a book to read is, do they have maps or illustrations? I'm not looking for that at all. But if there was one thing I would ask, that would be it. This book was good, like I said. I enjoyed it. I cared about the characters. I cared about what was going to happen to them. Some of them I just wanted to punch them in the nose, but that's just the book. That's, not really going to punch anybody in the nose. But yeah, I was frustrated with some of them and how they thought. I was like, y'all really need to read a book. Okay, y'all need to get a life. But it was the nature of the story, and that's okay. It's okay. It took me along for the ride. I enjoyed it, and I recommend it. And now I'm starting to babble. I'm starting to run on. I had a thought about what I was going to say next, and guess what? Pew, out the head. If you guys enjoyed the story, or if you haven't read it yet and are interested in it, or if your review is completely different from mine, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. The only thing that I ask is that you be kind to yourselves and be kind to each other. Let's not be mean down in the comments section. We are not going to debate what the political statements of the book are. I'm not going to do that. That takes the joy out of reading for me. I don't like doing that. I just want to read the story for the story's sake. If you have any other stories that you'd like me to read, let me know down in the comments. Maybe I've read the books already and I just need to refresh myself and I can do a review of them. Whatever. Yeah, just let me know. And that's it, I think. Yeah, go to your local library. Go check out a book. Read something. Something improves your cognitive brain functions. It helps you with your vocabulary, with your critical thinking, higher level thinking. Yeah, even if you just read comic books every day, who cares? You're reading something and that's awesome and I love it. So go read a book and have a great day. Bye.